I'm Laura London, and this is the Confrontation of Speaking of Jung. Returning to us today for episode 139 is Jungian psychoanalyst and filmmaker Luis Moris in Zurich, Switzerland. After completing secondary school in his home country of Chile, he spent the next 6 years in the United States, where he earned a master's degree in clinical psychology from Texas A&M University. He then went on to Nigeria to volunteer for Doctors Without Borders in a program against AIDS. His next destination was Paris, where he lived for 6 years before heading to Zurich to pursue Jungian studies. He entered the training program at the International School of Analytical Psychology, known as ISAP in Zurich, and graduated as a Jungian psychoanalyst in 2016. During his training at ISAP, Luis entered the doctoral program in Psychoanalytic Studies at the University of Essex in England. Under the supervision of Professor Roderick Main, who was our guest in episode 117, Luis has just completed his research on the role of life after death in Jung's psychotherapeutic methods and will graduate in July. In addition to practicing as a Jungian analyst, Luis works as a film director and writer. In 2016, he founded Blue Salamandra Films, a production house dedicated to creating artistic audiovisual works related to C.G. Jung and analytical psychology. To date, he has produced over 10 films and artistic podcasts. His full-length features include Jungian Speaking, available as a 9-volume DVD set, and Thomas Kirsch in Conversation with Murray Stein in the Home of C.G. Jung, which was also published as the book A Jungian Legacy, Tom Kirsch, edited by Luis. It includes contributions by Jung's grandson Andreas and Jungian analysts Dr. John Beebe, our guest in episode 109, and Professor Andrew Samuels. Luis's film on Thomas Kirsch has been selected for screening at this year's IAAP International Congress, which will be held in Zurich from August 24th through the 29th. Luis is also the editor of a new book titled Confronting Death, published in September by Chiron. The volume includes essays by consulting editor Murray Stein and Luis, as well as fellow Speaking of Jung guests Henry Abramovich, John Beebe, Paul Bishop, the late Anne Casement, and Joseph Cambray. This past Sunday, Luis presented at the book launch for Eranos, a play written by Jungian analysts Drs. Henry Abramovich and Murray Stein. Luis's essay, The Daimon of Eranos, is included in the book, which contains original essays by members of the play's ensemble made up exclusively of Jungian analysts. All of this and more are the subjects of our talk today. Please consider helping Speaking of Jung stay on the air by contributing to our tip jar on Patreon for just $5 a month, or by making a one-time or recurring donation through PayPal. You can find the links in the description box below, or by visiting the support page on our website, speakingofjung.com. You can also help our YouTube channel grow by clicking the thumbs up on this video, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. It's free and it helps us get more exposure. I am also here to remind you of the importance of recording your dreams. Temenos Dream is a revolutionary dream tracking app available for iOS and Android. Now you can record your dreams by speaking into your phone or typing them into the app. Search for myths, legends, and fairy tales related to the themes in your dreams. Use the new advanced AI interpretation with a focus on Jung's work, looking closely at symbols and associations to consider shadow, anima, animus, archetypes, and much more. You can help support Speaking of Jung simply by downloading the app and creating a free account. Unlimited use is available with a premium subscription. Click on the link in the description box below or on our website, speakingofjung.com, where you will find links to everything discussed in this episode in the show notes. This video interview is being recorded on Wednesday, March 12th, 2025, through the magic of StreamYard. Hi, Luis.
Hey, Laura. Good to see you.
It's great to see you again. I didn't mention in the intro, we did an episode together several years ago, episode 90.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes. There will be a link to that in the show notes. So, before we get to today's topic, which is your new book, Confronting Death, there are a couple of other projects of yours that I would like for you to tell us a little bit about, if you would.
Sure.
The first one is your film, Thomas B. Kirsch in Conversation with Murray Stein in the Home of C.G. Jung. It was selected to be shown at the upcoming Congress of the IAAP, which will take place this year in Zurich. Be shown on Wednesday night, August 27th.
Yes, I must say that I'm really happy and honored that film was selected. It was recorded in the home of C.G. Jung, so there are some I believe beautiful images of the home of C.G. Jung. And it is an interview, and it's a film dedicated to Tom Kirsch. Few months, or I would say a few weeks after he turned 80.
Tell us a little bit about who Tom Kirsch was.
Tom was a major figure in the International Association of Analytical Psychology. He was president, I want to say, for 8 years, but maybe only 4. And he was someone that promoted Jungian psychology all over the world. He brought Jungian psychology to China, I believe to Russia as well. His secretary was Moris. They were friends for decades. And he wrote a very important book called The History of Jungians, or Jungians.
I think it was titled The Jungians.
The Jungians, right? So it's and Tom had an incredible memory, and in the film you see that you see how much he remembers about little details here and there about his encounter with Jung in that same house. And he's a very important figure in our history. What I'm saying about him is very incomplete because he played a major role at the international level. And next time you talk to Murray Stein, ask him who Tom Kirsch was, and he will give you a much better picture. And above all, he was a very sweet, feeling type person. He was just so approachable, so kind. The first time I saw him was in 2013 at the International Congress in Copenhagen. I saw him speaking in a book lounge, and I totally fell in love with the man. He was just kind and warm and simple and approachable and very intelligent, very knowledgeable. So it is, being an ex-president from the IAP, I think that is a great film to show the Congress. And I cannot think of a better place to show a film like that the Congress. So I'm really thrilled and honored the film is going to be shown.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
So Tom Kirsch was a Jungian analyst, and he passed away only a few years ago, right?
Yeah, he passed away soon after the book. I mean, the film was made. So the film was made in 2016. I went to San Francisco, to the Jung Institute in San Francisco, to show the film in 2017. And the night before we showed the film in the institute, he couldn't come. Unfortunately, he was supposed to come. He couldn't come. He was not doing well. So I believe that he passed away soon after that. I want to say that he passed away at the beginning of 2018, late 2017. Yeah.
And the transcript of that film was published as a book, published by Chiron, titled The Jungian Legacy.
Right.
A Jungian legacy.
A Jungian legacy. Yeah,
Mhm.
and it is not just a transcript, but there are essays from beloved friends such as Andrew Samuels, Andreas Jung, the grandson of Jung, John Beebe, Tom Singer. Um, and that I should say also that after the film is shown at the Congress, there will be a panel discussion.
Oh, nice.
John Beebe will be the person that will be uh, organizing the panel,
Mhm.
and the panel will be composed by Murray, Andreas Jung, Tom Singer, and Jean Kirsch, Tom's wife,
Tom's
who is
wife.
also a wonderful, very sweet person, very supportive of all these projects.
Mhm. So I'd like to also talk a little bit about the book that was published just a few days ago on Sunday,
Right.
titled Eranos, a Play. Chiron Publications presented a book launch on Zoom, and all of the contributors were there. I was there too. Thank you, Henry, for inviting me. And I think it relates very much to the book on death. So let's just talk a little bit about Eranos, a Play, since it was just published. In your essay, The Daimon of Eranos, you say the psychology club in Zurich is haunted. I love that because I love that building. And I want you to tell us a little bit about why you think it's haunted.
I know it is.
You know it is. Okay.
I've experienced it. Um, I must say, Laura, that I'm not fully sure how much I should say
Okay.
about it,
Okay.
but I'm
I
going
won't
to say,
pressure you. No pressure.
okay, but I'm going to say that that I've been there several times, and I was there also as a student, and just spooky things happen there. Just it is a very charged place, and I mean it. I mean it.
Mm.
It's haunted. I in a good way. In a good way.
And Jung's death mask is in there still, isn't it? It's in the
Um,
lecture hall?
right. Yeah. I didn't know that it was his death mask. It might be. Yeah. I don't know about that, but yes, it is. It is. There is.
And then that portrait, that big oil painting of Toni Wolff, who
Yes, it
she
is
was the president for many years.
for many
And when you
years.
walk in, is it still there?
I should be there. I haven't been there for probably a year and a half or so. But last time I checked, it was there, and she's
Larger
very
than life.
imposing. Oh, she's very imposing in there. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a, that was really the home of Jung in Zurich. That's where he had his private home in Küsnacht, but when it came to his public home,
Mhm.
where he gave his lectures, where he was social, that was the place.
And his office is there
His
on
office is there, yes.
one of
Now
the higher
occupied.
floors.
No, on the ground floor, I believe that's where Andreas Schweitzer
Yes.
has his office right now. A beautiful office on the corner with
Yes.
a couple of windows. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah. I was actually in that room, and
Yeah,
I was one of the highlights of my life,
yeah,
really, was to have been in that room.
absolutely. Yeah,
And also, you remind us in your essay, The Daimon of Eranos, that Jung felt the land at Bollingen was connected with the dead. He wrote that in Memories, Dreams, Reflections.
yeah,
Um, what? So I've not been to Bollingen. Have you been there? I would
yeah. I've been
imagine.
there. I've been there once. Yeah, only once. I was greeted by great grandson of Jung, and I went there with my motorbike, not expecting
Mm,
to enter, but the gates were open, so I just allowed myself to walk in there, and
mhm.
the great grandson was having a sort of good time with his friends, and he said, sure. I introduced myself and said,
Wow.
sure, come in. And I could just walk about, stay with them. And I left rather soon because I didn't want to bother them. They were having
Yeah.
a good time. But it was, yes, it is. That's another definitely magical place.
And by the way, just to go on record, I wouldn't recommend people just pop in.
I wouldn't either.
When I was in Zurich, I didn't do that. I wasn't,
Yeah.
somebody once told me a long time ago, don't go where you're not invited. So
Yeah.
I try to keep that in mind. And, but you were a student at ISAP and
I
know
was
people.
at the time, yeah. And I've heard also stories of people jumping the fence, and I would never do that. But I was really warmly invited to just walk about, and
Mhm.
it was just wonderful. But I didn't want to just be an intrusive, so I didn't, even though they invited me to stay for longer. I didn't want to, but just being there for a little while, it was wonderful.
Was wonderful. And you mentioned that Jung felt that land was connected to the dead. So
Right.
that brings us to your book that you edited. Murray Stein was the consulting editor. It was released in the fall while Speaking of Jung was on hiatus. Otherwise, I would have had you right away. And I was able to watch a replay of the book launch where all the contributors were there, including the late Anne Casement, which we
That's
will
right.
get to. So the book is over 400 pages. It contains 12 essays. Some of them were by Speaking of Jung guests. And you open the book with your essay,
Right.
Jung's Confrontation with Death and Introduction. So I'm going to get out of the way and let you tell us a little bit about that.
Right. I write in the introduction of the beginning of the introduction that the book came, the idea of writing that book, creating that book, came very naturally to me. As you mentioned in your introduction, I did a PhD at the University of Essex under the supervision of Roderick Main, who, by the way, is a wonderful supervisor and funny person. And that's so important to have humor in a PhD, And my research title was the interplay between the here and the hereafter, which is a phrase of Jung's. And it's all about life after death in the psychology of Jung. That's what this is about. So I, of course, had to research about what Jungians, not just Jung, but Jungians have said about death and life after death. And it was a surprise to me, and this is something that Shamdazani said in 2008. It was a surprise to me to see how little there is on that theme. There are certainly very good books written about the topic, and they are part of my book, Confronting Death. I'm thinking of Susan Olson. She wrote a very, very moving and informative and well-written book about the passing of her own daughter and the experiences through dreams that she had of her daughter in a life after death. The book is called Images of Grief in Dreams, something like that, from Susan Olson. I can send it to you, so if you want to put it in your notes,
Yes.
that would be wonderful. So that there is that book. Verena Kast has written a couple of books on grief and death. Stephanie Stevens, also part of the book as well, part of my book. She also wrote a very good book, Sege Jung and the Dead, published by Routledge not too long ago, 2018, I believe. So there has been some important contributions, but as you notice, I'm mentioning only 3 people, and there are some more. Morganson has written some essays about it, but there isn't a whole bunch
Right.
about, not only about the concept or the notion of life after death, but the notion of death. What is, how do we Jungians, how do we therapists work with death? So it was, as you say, a no-brainer to propose Murray Stein. Let's do this. Let's write a book about how Jungians confront death. How do they, if they do, prepare for death? Because this is what Jung wrote about. He was very straightforward about the idea that the goal of life is death, that we need to come up with a conception of life after death. It is vital, he writes, to do so. And that he saw and understood analysis as a preparation for death. That's how he frames analysis in many different ways, but that's one of the ways that he frames analysis, as a preparation for death. And just to finish, so for me, basically, it was a very natural thing to do, to think of, well, let's talk to older analysts that are perhaps facing that question, whether they are preparing to die, and that's how it started, the project.
And you have a nice balance and mixture of, you have male and female analysts, a non-analyst, contributions from individuals from different countries and different perspectives, to look at it from different angles. And I was very surprised to read some of what Jung had written about death and about analysis, which we'll get into. But I would just like for you to say a little bit about what you mean by life after death, also considering that your thesis is on life after death in Jung's theories and Jung's psychology. And do you mean, well, what do you mean by life after death? I'll let you tell us.
Yeah, thank you. That I think is a very good question. Before saying anything about that, one very important thing to say is that Jung was not always the most consistent thinker. That's why I like him so much.
Yeah.
But he was consistent about one thing, though, throughout his writings, and is that we shouldn't be messing around with metaphysical statements. And throughout his writings, he states that he is a scientist and that he works with scientific material. Now, you can debate both of these statements, but he was very consistent about it. So when he would speak about life after death, he was, never stating that there is, I mean, he did say it in letters, but in private conversations and letters, that there is a life after death, that there is a Christian type of life after death or a Hindu type of life after death. He was basically stating that we need to confront the idea not only of our end, which is our physical ending, our physical death, but also that we need to come up with a conception, an image of the possibility that there might be something after our body dies. And I think that after reading Jung, it is fair to say that he was very cautious every time that he would speak about life after death. And sometimes he was bold in letters after 1944 when he had his heart attack. In a couple of letters, he was pretty, bold about saying, I'm convinced that after the death of the body, the soul detaches from the body and it continues its journey, as it were. And so he was, he could say things like that. But generally, if he was speaking to a larger public, he was very cautious to the idea of stating, that there is absolutely life after death. Yet at the same time, he encouraged all of us to confront the question, basically, to confront the possibility, and to confront the possibility mainly through two channels, as it were, which is dreams and active imagination. This is what he did. Through his own dreams and through the dreams of clients, he revised his own ideas and his own images of life after death. This is something that you will find in the chapter "Life After Death: From Memories, Dream Reflections," and of course, the Red Book. Active imagination is what constitutes basically the Red Book, and the Red Book is filled with images that Jung calls the dead. How we understand these images is, of course, open to debate, but people like Shamdazani or people like Stephanie Stevens, who I mentioned earlier, are convinced that Jung understood some of these images in the Red Book not as just a fantasy, but basically as the dead, the literal dead, souls without bodies. They Roderick Main will be another person that would say that that's the way Jung seems to have understood the images of the dead in the Red Book. Some of them, at least.
Well, I'm wondering if there is a distinction between, and this is a very difficult subject to grasp, about what is real. So you had mentioned that Jung is a scientist and didn't want to look at things that were metaphysical. And my question is, what is real and what is manifestations from our own unconscious? All the stories that we hear or that Jung wrote about ghosts, the house being haunted. How do we know that that isn't our own unconscious? How do we know that it's something outside of ourselves? You mentioned a soul detaching from the body. So is it a physical or non-physical entity in and of itself, or is this something that we're projecting? Is this something from our own unconscious?
Right. Well, I mean, I would approach that by kind of asking also, why would we think that because it is psychic, it is not real?
Let me interrupt you there. It's because people bring that up a lot to me.
Right.
Why? Because it is an internal, a subjective experience.
Right.
And to me, is that still real? If only I can see it, only I can hear it, only I can know it, but nobody else can. Isn't that my unconscious?
Well, I mean, I suppose, you could say exactly the same thing about a thought or about a feeling or about a dream. With all our technology, we cannot see your thoughts. We cannot see and measure what you feel. You can tell me what you're thinking,
Mhm.
uh, but, but but there is no way for me. There is no technology yet created to observe, measure, anticipate your thoughts or your feelings. But they are real, aren't they? I mean, you've got your thoughts, and it is a subjective experience. Yes, absolutely, but they are nonetheless real.
But I can also say it's just a thought. It isn't real.
Right, right, and I think that's what, um, and that's my understanding of Jung. That's what he um, would say is our most important tool when it comes to addressing metaphysical questions. It is our own subjective experience, because um, they have the possibility of um, showing us reality that is not physical, that is psychic. And in a nutshell, what my understanding of Jung is, when it comes to addressing the question of whether there is life after death or not, relies on the notion that your own subjective experience is the only way to address the question, to confront the question, to test the question, is by taking very, very seriously your active imagination and your dreams, and to take them seriously and to test them, to go over them again, to look at dreams of other people, so you can create, um, or you can wrestle with the possibility, because it's a possibility. I'm not saying that life after death exists. I'm not saying that the Red Book is what is an image of life after death. I'm just saying that what Jung is proposing is that it is precisely through our subjective experience that we have the possibility of taking these seriously, and to not just intellectualize it away by stating, like some people say to you, "Oh, that is just a thought," or "That is
Mhm.
just a dream." Uh, Jung is going, I believe, totally against that way of thinking by saying precisely, it is something to take very, very seriously.
To take seriously,
Well,
indeed. Yes.
uh, and that to me is Jung's greatest, I don't know if greatest, but that is one of his greatest contribution to our modern, postmodern world, is
Mm.
to say that, um, it is through investigating ourselves we might realize, using Roderick Main's words, that the world is not disenchanted.
Mm.
Um, it is Jung's way of re-enchanting, to a certain
Mm.
degree, the world.
You mentioned that as analysts, as Jungian analysts, that you welcome death into the analytical room, but actually has an aim to integrate it with life. So you welcome death into the room in order to integrate it with life.
Right.
And I'd like to talk about that, but I'm seeing here now a quote, so that the unconscious is a precursor to life after death. And I think they relate. So in analysis, we work with the unconscious. And in so many words, Jung said that the unconscious is a precursor to life after death. Would you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So the way I'm thinking about approaching your question is to think about the very first paragraph, the first page, first paragraph of Jung's latest great work, which is Mysterium Conjunctionis. In the very first paragraph, Jung gives an example of what he is talking about. What is the Mysterium Conjunctionis? What is this coming together? And he makes a list. It's a long list of things that come together in the union of opposites. And in this list, one of the opposites that come together in this conjunction is life and death. He said the factors that contribute to the union of opposites, something like that. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And and I think that how I would like to approach your question is bringing death to life to a certain degree, is bringing one of these opposites, one of the opposites of existence.
Yeah.
In this cosmic notion of the unus mundus that Jung writes about at the end of his life, part of the unus mundus is these two opposites. Is the idea that death, it's just another part of existence. It is something that not only it is important to see it as an end, because in itself that contributes to living a healthier life. I'm convinced about that facing our mortality, but also the idea of integrating the other side.
Integrating the other side of life.
Of existence, which would be death.
And how do we do that? How do we do that in analysis? Yeah.
The main thing is by taking seriously images that we might confront that speak of a life after death. Usually, there are exceptions, of course, but usually people that come to analysis are in the second half of life. Jungian psychology is kind of almost made for that. Not entirely, of course. There are a lot of Jungian analysis now for adolescents and children, but originally Jung wrote for the second half of life. And in the second half of life, we start facing death. Jung would say that that's where death is born, in the crisis of the second half of life, like it was for him in 1913 when that was the initiation for confronting the second the confrontation with the unconscious, and he says that is the beginning of the birth of death begins then. Therefore, we, because naturally we are in the second half of life, we start seeing death around us.
Yeah.
We start thinking about our own end. We are going to die. I'm going to die. But we start also experiencing, loved ones that are passing, parents, uncles, and that inevitably brings us into the question: is death the end? And then you have the one question, very simple, and that I think that is experienced in most psychotherapies, not just Jungian. Freudian would do that. Cognitive therapy would do that. Behaviorists would do. You have to just, if your mother dies, most likely you're going to bring that to your therapy.
Mhm.
The difference with Jungian analysis, I think, is that, on top of the experience itself of losing a loved one, it is highly likely that you're going to have, again, subjective experiences that are going to somehow make you wonder about life after death,
Mhm.
a dream, synchronistic experience,
Mhm.
a paranormal experience.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, you felt the odor of your mother, of your grandmother. All of a sudden, you had a dream of your late father that came and visit you, like it happened a few times to Jung and to von Franz. And then basically, you can take that at a very, say, conscious level and speak about your feelings and your grief, and that's probably very necessary to do. But because Jung and Jungians believe that the psyche is real, we are confronted with the question: is this a subjective dream or an objective dream?
Mhm.
Meaning, if my father passed away and I'm having a dream of my father, I have to ask myself, is this image in the dream of my father a part of me? Is this my shadow? Is this an image of myself?
Mhm.
And therefore I interpret or work with the dream from that perspective? Or is this an objective dream, meaning it has nothing to do with me? It is speaking about my father. And Jung did that. I mean, you don't need to go very far to start reading places where Jung interpret dreams of von Franz. The example that I'm thinking is von Franz.
Yeah.
In Dreams and Death of her. She writes how Jung interpret a dream of von Franz's father coming to visit her as an objective dream. He said, your father came to visit you in a dream. That was your father. It's an objective dream. So that is a very straightforward way, in a sense, of bringing death to life. To me, is by we have that possibility, Jungians, of taking that dream as an objective dream and interpretation. And just to finish,
Yeah.
what is so powerful to me as a therapist is that, and this is what James Hillman said, is that therapists cannot not have a philosophy of death.
Okay.
We have to, because we have different ways of understanding dreams, different possibilities of interpreting. We are confronting with death on a regular basis. So we have to create a philosophy, and it doesn't have to be a fixed philosophy. It has
Good point.
Jung's images of life after death were not fixed; they were moving, and until the very end of his life, he was still wrestling with the question of whether there is reincarnation or not. But we are confronted with that. We cannot not have a philosophy about it, even if it is a flexible and changing philosophy. Sorry, you wanted to say something?
No, please.
Yeah, no,
Great.
I was kind of done with the answer.
Yeah. So you mentioned Jung's heart attack that he experienced in 1944, and following that, he had a near-death experience.
Right.
And he had visions that made him consider that he had actually died and come back to life.
Right.
So, and then after that, he was able to enlarge some of his concepts, specifically of the archetype, when he introduced his concept of the psychoid archetype, which I think needs to be explored more and more. So I'd like to ask you, and I'm pressing you on these things because I know you've been researching this topic for many, many years. As we mentioned, it's the topic of your doctoral thesis. So as far as a near-death experience of him actually physically dying and coming back to life. Now, I know that there seems to be evidence out there of people who actually physically died. The body was declared dead and then came back, and then they report their experience. My skepticism with that, because I'm always looking at the other side, is because this person was able to come back, and I don't know, but I think most people who die don't have that option. I don't know, maybe we all do. Who knows? Because we can't really communicate with somebody who has passed away. People think they can. I don't know about the evidence of that. So what I'm getting at is Jung's near-death experience. What do you think that was?
A near-death experience, without a doubt.
Well, what I mean by that is, I guess my question is more, what is happening during a near-death experience, the type of which one is physically declared dead and then comes back. So intrapsychically, what's going on there?
Okay, so I just want to say that there has been, for over 100 years, research on near-death experiences, scientific, hardcore research, and I personally find it fascinating, the research on that. And there is a group of neuroscientists from the University of Virginia, not at all Jungians, okay? Neuroscientists, and from the Department of Perception, and they there are some of the very best scientific research that has come out of near-death experiences are coming from there. So I'm thinking about Bruce Grayson. He's one of them. And there is, by the way, in Netflix, a sort of series that is called Life After Death. And Bruce Grayson is part of them. And they are studying people that claimed to have died and to have come back to life. And they research this in all different types of with scientific methodology. Now, you take these research the way you want to, but what I'm trying to say with that is that Jung's experience and the way he writes about it is not at all an isolated case. The way the euphoria that he reports, the sense of union that he reports, it is a quite common phenomenon that people claiming having a near-death experience claim to have had. So I would certainly, if some of the people that are listening to this are interested in that sort of question, I would strongly advise them to research on that, to look at Kelly, I cannot remember his first name, but Bruce Grayson would be definitely one of them. Well, intraphysically, to answer your question, what is happening. Well, Jung, I think, would say that what is happening is that his body is basically um, uh, has died, that the organs are not working anymore, that the brain is not working anymore. Uh, but there is much more to existence than our physicality, and that we've got um, something in us, or maybe it's around us, don't know, which we call soul, because that's kind of the way we try to come to go around this notion, and that exists independently of our body, and that is atemporal, and that is intelligent, and that when the body dies, this thing, this notion, continues to exist, and his visions of floating in space and approaching this rock temple um, is for him was, and I think that he was totally convinced about it, that it was his soul, and it was his soul that was approaching this rock temple, which was going to be the very end. There was going to be death, basically.
Yeah.
That's, and I agree with Shamdazani and with Stevens and with Hillman. I believe that Jung was convinced about it. Now that we have difficulties going that far, I totally understand. I also have difficulties myself at times.
Right, because he was under duress. He was ill. And so maybe the euphoria was because he was not feeling the pain anymore, something going on in the brain, something about an oxygen level. The truth, as I see it, is that we've never spoken to anyone who died and stayed dead.
Right.
So we don't know.
Right.
So we're talking about how do we prepare for death when we don't know what it is. We don't know with 100% certainty what's on the other side. So,
and I would definitely agree with you. We don't know, and we cannot know. And I think that Jung was very strong about that. We cannot for certain say that there is a God. It is a metaphysical statement. However, we receive hints from the unconscious. We receive hints. We have synchronistic events that are way beyond our understanding. Our rational mind cannot fully grasp the idea of a higher intelligence that causally would put together two events. Yet we have synchronistic events all the time. And what we make out of these synchronistic experiences is at the end of the day, I agree with you, in our secular society, it's up to the individual. And that's why I think Jungian psychology is kind of at the edge of psychoanalysis, which is at the edge of mainstream psychology, is because we embrace the possibility, and that's, like, for me, is the key word, is the last word of the Red Book: possibility.
Yeah.
The very last word. It's a possibility, and I think that Jung is inviting us to wrestle with that possibility, and we cannot be certain. I agree, but isn't it that a blessing to be uncertain about existence? I find it a blessing.
Yeah, I'm trying to get there. I'm still mad about it. So I don't want to leave out any of this good stuff that I've highlighted
Yeah.
from your chapter and your essay, which opens the book. It's again titled Jung's Confrontation with Death, an Introduction. I call it a Bob Dylan song, which means every sentence in that essay could be an entire essay of itself. There's so much packed in this essay. It is incredible, the amount of notes I've taken. So I want to applaud you for this. And I'd
Thank you.
like to move on because I don't want to leave any of this out. You say Jung created a psychological framework that not only allows us to speak of the dead and of life after death within his psychology, but also encourages us to view death as a goal, as an experience of the other side of existence, as a culmination of our psychological development. I find that on the one hand outrageous, and on the other hand so inspiring. So death as a goal, really? Yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Oh, then, 1934, The Soul and Death. That's not the first time that Jung wrote that death is a goal, but that's where he makes it very, very clear. Collective Works, number 8. A very powerful essay. Another essay, and I'm just saying this, another essay in which he mentions that, a very important essay on the same volume, number 8, is The Stages of Life. An incredibly well written, I think it was written for the newspaper, that Jung wrote, in which he states that the goal of life is death. And where he uses a notion that that he first used in his student years in the Sofinga lectures, stating that the psyche is inherently moving forward, always moving forward. Life is always moving forward, and the goal of it is death. Right. That's I must say that is a little bit my take on that, my interpretation of that. But I think that it is not too wild to say that Jung saw death as the possibility where we will reach the highest levels of individuation. Now that sounds pretty far out. I totally get that.
Yeah.
But if we take the idea that I mentioned earlier, that death is simply another part of existence, is the opposite of life, and is part of the unus mundus. We will experience death fully when we die, and we will be able to experience a higher cosmic mystic, the mystic and cosmic side of existence when we die. Therefore, we will reach a higher level of individuation at that time.
Because you say how to prepare for death was a paramount question for Jung. And you also point out that Shamdasani noted that Jung came to consider his personal transformation, his individuation, was a preparation for death. That
Right.
Individuation is a preparation for death.
Absolutely. And again, I'm quoting Jung.
Yeah.
That is not something. It's not an interpretation of mine.
Right.
There is this great book of that was published in 2023 of Aniela Jaffe's conversations with Jung.
Yes, reflections. I did an episode with
You did, yeah.
Robert Hinshaw about it.
Yeah, I listened to it. That was excellent.
Thank you.
Well, in one of these conversations,
Mm-hmm.
Jung states very clearly that his confrontation with his inner images served him as a preparation for death, just like philosophy was for Plato.
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain, the way I understand that is that Jung understood these inner images, some of them, as the dead, as the real dead. And by confronting these inner images, he was indeed bringing death to life. He was experiencing the other side of existence by confronting the inner images in his active imagination or in dreams as well. Again, it is a very bold statement. I totally get that, and I totally understand how you would say, "No, this is just crazy." These are just simply, these were projections, or these were just fantasy, personal fantasies. Period. There is absolutely no way of going against that argument, except that for Jung, it seemed that it wasn't the case. It seemed that he took that, very seriously, and that he thought that these images were the dead, and that by confronting them, he was bringing death to life. And I'm going to throw something even more outrageous.
Please.
And this is not me. This is Shamdazani, who first wrote about it in an essay. Incredible, powerful essay from 2008 in journal The Quadrant. The essay is called "The Boundless Expand." Something, reflections of Jung on life and death, or something like that. The Boundless Expand. In this essay, Shamdazani, which, by the way, was an essay published as 1 year before the publication of the Red Book.
Yes.
He states that because Jung believed that he was confronting the dead, he postulated the idea that Jung had a private cosmology, which is a kind of contradicting phrase. It's private and it's at the same time a cosmology. And I think he did that on purpose, and that in his private cosmology, it is our mission to become more individuated, because by doing so, we are helping the dead continue their own individuation process. Your own dead, Laura's dead, my own dead, by working on ourselves, by answering our questions, the questions of my ancestors, the questions that they left for me. By doing that work, I am helping them, if they haven't fully reached death, but they are still in the process of dying after the body has died.
Okay.
I will be helping them to continue their individuation. And another very if one of our listeners is going shouting, saying that I'm crazy and that is nonsense, what that person is to do is to just simply pick up Memories, Dream, Reflections, go to the chapter Life After Death, and read after the second or third page an example that Jung gives about a dream of a patient of his. And in the dream, she's dead. She's in the land of the dead, and she is in a classroom, and everyone is waiting for the speaker to come and teach. And after a little while, nobody's showing up, no professor is showing up. And then she realizes, oh, it's me. I'm the one that is supposed to be teaching the dead. Jung takes that and says, that's, a hint that he gets that helps him to continue building his image of life after death, in which, as Shamdasani said in that essay, Jung understood individuation process not only as something for the individual, not something for the community, but also for the dead. It had different dimensions. So I just wanted to throw that, because that is more outrageous, as it were. We are going into more metaphysical stuff from Jung.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. I had pulled out something else from that essay, or was it a book? No, it was a paper by Shamdasani.
Yeah, an article. Yeah, 17 pages, very short.
Okay, I'll have a link to it in the show notes. And you mentioned in your essay in Confronting Death that Shamdasani reframed analysis, the process of Jungian analysis, psychoanalysis, as not how is your life going, but how is your death coming along?
That's right.
Would be the critical question from this perspective.
Absolutely.
Not how is your life going, right, but how is your death coming along?
Yeah, Ars Moriendi, he writes, the art of dying. Absolutely. Again, this is not coming from me. This is something that Shamdasani has written about almost 2 decades ago. That's how we could frame. That's how Jung came to understand his psychology and his therapeutic method, and how we can understand the therapeutic method. It's a preparation. It's a preparation for death, and and it's a privilege, and it is enriching to think, at least for me, to think of my work in such terms. It brings a completely different dimension to the work. To think that what we're doing actually is we are preparing to die. I think that all the time.
Do you? Well, now I'm going to too. And yeah, thank you for that. Just as we're coming up on the end of our time, I would just like to mention this, because you say in your essay that this statement of Jung's is the seed of this book, that Jung wrote a commentary on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and he said, the only initiation process that is still alive and practiced today in the West is the analysis of the unconscious as used by doctors in the therapeutic purposes. So you say that statement is the seed of this book.
It is. It is because I asked each contributor to answer three questions. The three questions were, do you prepare for death? And if so, how? And the second or third question was, has the writings of Sergei Jung helped you for that preparation? So the idea of preparing for death, the idea of confronting death, is absolutely, it is the seed, the bottom line of the book. And I find that, as you very well said, the book is brings very different cultural views on how to prepare to die. And well, of course, I have to say that, but I say it because I really, really believe it. It is a beautiful statement and a richer statement of how Jungians can be, from very different angles, from different cultural backgrounds, come to a question, confront a question, all of them using Jungian psychology.
Mm-hmm. And as we wrap up, I just would like to mention one of the contributors of this book, the late Anne Casement, who was a guest on this podcast 2 times. She died 4 months after the book launch. And as I mentioned in the beginning, Chiron had a book launch on Zoom and all the contributors were there and Anne was there. So I don't know if maybe that was her last time on recorded video. But her chapter is about death cafes, where you discuss your wishes for your own forthcoming death over coffee and croissant, as she said. And I just want to mention in her honor that she personally left her body to the National Health Service so that they can use, she said, any bit of me. And then after that, disposes of your remains. So she doesn't need to have any sort of funeral. And the nearer and dearer will mark my demise, she said, in ways they see fitting. So I'd like to say that in her memory. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. And her essay, it was the very first essay that I received for the book. And I just completely adore it. It is, I believe that is the essay right after Moris' essay. I decided it needed to be the first one after my introduction. He's the consultant editor. And I believe that right after that is Anne's essay, because it's just such an incredible, so well written, short, and it's wonderful. And she's on the spot. I find that she's all about bringing death to life, all about kind of, and I think that this is what she mentions, is the idea of just stopping this ridiculous idea of death being a taboo, and let's bring the death cafes again, and let's talk about death.
Let's talk about grief.
Let's talk about it.
Let's
Absolutely.
talk about it. Yeah. As we're doing here today.
That's what we're doing here today. Yes.
Thank you so much, Luis.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for being interested in the book and in this topic. I am totally aware that it's not an easy topic to approach. So I really appreciate you having the desire to talk about it. And like I said to you, before we started, I was really thrilled and happy that you asked me to participate again in your program, because it has become a reference. It has become an online reference. You asked only qualified Jungians and scholars to speak, and I find that what you do is a great contribution to the field.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, and thank you for this book. Really, and thank you for addressing my questions and concerns, because as you mentioned, we need to wrestle with these questions, not just nod politely and smile, but really get in there and toss it around and look at it from different angles and think about it and then come back to it and walk away from it. But I'll never look at analysis and life the same. Actually, this has been very eye-opening. Thank you again.
Thank you. I thank you for saying that, and I believe that that's exactly how Jung understood it. From his entire life, he was preoccupied in a good way about life after death and about death. It was always in his mind. He didn't write about it systematically, He didn't write systematically about it, but he did write here and there. And if we bring all these pieces together, we see that there is something. I mean, there is a chapter called "Life After Death" in his in Memories. So
Right.
so it's pretty clear. It was very important for him. So thank you for saying that. Yes.
Yeah, and it's of interest, and the protocols, which will be released here sometime soon, hopefully, the protocols to Memories, Dreams, Reflections. I think the most interest in what additionally did he have to say about life after death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're looking forward to that.
Thank you again, Luis. Speaking of Jung is not just a podcast, it is also a website. Please visit speakingofjung.com, where you will find extensive information on the life and work of C.G. Jung, show notes and audio downloads for all of our 161 episodes, a comprehensive books page, a blog, and now a monthly email newsletter, which you can sign up for at the bottom of our front page. All of our episodes are also available on YouTube podcasts, which you can access by subscribing to this channel, Jungian Laura. It's free. Just click the subscribe button below. I created Speaking of Jung almost 10 years ago. This year is our 10th anniversary. And all of our content is still free to access, but it is not free to produce. Please consider contributing to our tip jar on Patreon for just $5 a month, or visit our support page at speakingofjung.com/support for links on all the ways you can help keep this podcast and our website alive. With special thanks to Patricia Priestner and to Dr. Stephen Buser and Jennifer Fitzgerald at Chiron Publications, I am Laura London, and you've been watching The Confrontation of Speaking of Jung.